Before introducing our guest, the Reverend Dietrich Bonhoeffer, let me begin with he's been dead a long time, so don't look so alarmed. Let me begin with an example of the resistance of our national Unitarian Church, resistance to the growth of Nazism in Europe in the 1930s. You may never have heard about a Unitarian couple from Boston, Waite Still Sharp, that's his name. Some of you are nodding, yes, you've heard of him. And Martha Sharp, his wife. I remember that I only heard about this risk-taking, heroic couple after I had been a Unitarian Universalist for about 10 years, and yet now their activism will seem more relevant than ever and closer to the top of the list of things to know about the Unitarian Church and our role in resistance against the Third Reich. So here's what happened in February 1939. Reverend Sharp and his social worker wife, Martha, accepted a request from the American Unitarian Association, that's what it was called then, before there was the unity between the Unitarians and the Universalists. It was called the AUA. I shouldn't speak off the cuff because then I lose my place. They accepted a request from the AUA to travel from their home in the United States to aid refugees, Jewish refugees in Prague. Motivated by their faith and moral outrage, they made the difficult decision to leave behind their 2 small children and spend 6 months in Prague distributing food and money and helping to organize the escape efforts. And months later, in July of 1939, the Gestapo shut down their operation. They narrowly escaped arrest and returned home undeterred. Again, in May of 1940, they returned to Europe, facing an increasingly risky situation to continue their rescue efforts, which ultimately helped 2,000 refugees escape Nazi hands. The Unitarian organization that they represented in this work in the late 1930s is known as the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, and I'm often teased about this because I mention it so often. I'm the liaison from this congregation to the UUSC. Happy to do that. The USC partners with many international organizations on numerous projects. So when we give money to the UUSC, we're giving it to the head organization who then partners with those organizations. And now we have a slide, I think. Do we have a slide? All right. You know who this is? This is the main focus today, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I have to take a look. Oh, he's right there. I forget that I can see right there. So our main focus today is the role of the German church and resistance against Hitler. Representing the church, let us welcome the on-screen presence of the Reverend Dr. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. A brief synopsis of his life: he was born 1909, grew up in Grunewald, that's a suburb of Berlin, an upper-class section of Berlin. His father was a top psychiatrist, and Dietrich had a twin sister and brothers. Dietrich was expected to become a concert pianist, musician. He showed a lot of talent early on, or a professor of theology, nothing so humble as a Lutheran minister. So, Guten Morgen, Herr Bonhoeffer. Herr Dr., Reverend Dr. Bonhoeffer. How are you? Thank you so much for transporting yourself here, however you did that. AI, maybe? I see your ghostly figure is wearing your usual 3-piece suit. Well, you can't see it, but he is, believe me. We're pretty informal here. Please feel free to remove your jacket. We've never met. Well, I guess that's not surprising. Our lives did overlap. Only during my first 5 years of life, I was 4 years old in 1944. Ugh. Can you believe that? When you were part of a group who tried to assassinate Adolf Hitler, and I was 5, when the Nazis killed you by hanging because the group wasn't successful. Someone successful in killing him, Hitler, okay? Someone moved the briefcase full of plastic explosives. Perhaps you know about this. They were in a big office space, and there was a briefcase full of explosives. It was supposed to go off at a certain time. Well, it went off, but somebody who didn't know what was going on moved the briefcase away. So it only scathed Hitler a little bit. I think he had a few scratches. Well, so our lives overlapped. I said that. Okay. I will have to say I don't recall knowing about any of that. It's so sad that the Nazis ended your life just 2 months before World War II ended. That year in 1945, maybe my parents knew about you. I do remember how excited everyone was when the war ended. VA Day, 1945 in May. I come from a family of 6. All 6 of us piled in my dad's big Buick, enjoying the parade of slow-moving cars along the main streets around the Capitol building in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and cruising along Front Street by the Susquehanna River and parading across the bridges, everyone delirious, honking car horns and winding down car windows to wave small American flags and cheer. That memory seems especially significant now because here in the USA, those of us who are old enough to remember that day in 1945, that day of Germany's unconditional surrender, and everyone who knows the history of that tyranny of Adolf Hitler, that 20th century tyrant in Germany, we are now increasingly concerned, at least I am, that this time it's our tyrant, and he is closer to home. Whoever would have predicted then what we're seeing now? So, Dietrich, thanks for being present while I thought about that memory and established the context for a reflection on the role of the church in resistance against Hitler. I have learned that you lived a life in constant discernment. As we say in the ministry, discernment, soul-searching, about your personal role in resistance against Nazism, in discernment of good and evil, in discernment about the value of pastoring a church versus teaching theology at a university. Your example of constant self-examination of your role and the role of the church has been important to me and to others. Thank you so much. Sometimes you have been misrepresented. In 2010, the far-right radio host Eric Metaxas wrote the book Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Martyr, Prophet, Spy, and it has become a runaway hit. Then that book caught the attention of Donald Trump in 2020. He loves that book. He uses the words of the author and the comments about your writing to support his tyrannical behaviors. He says that the so-called stolen election was a Bonhoeffer moment, and that lethal force was now permissible to keep Donald Trump in power. What's right is right, he says. We need to fight to the death, he says, to the last blood. Oh, Dietrich, I'm wondering how you feel about that book and that misrepresentation of you. It's become very popular, that book, in the United States, the blue cover with your face on it, everywhere. What's that you're saying? So you're explaining to me that you are rather annoyed at this misrepresentation of you in fictionalized biography and film like those by Eric Metaxas, and you would rather people like me and others who want to explain about you and your legacy should go to primary sources. You are suggesting that we consider, for example, the letter that you wrote to your girlfriend while you were in prison after your assassination attempt on Hitler's life. And in your letter, you were looking back on your life 10 years previous, and you wrote, "Dear Maria, I heard myself into my work in an unchristian and humble manner. Then something else came along, something which has permanently changed my life and its direction. I had often preached. I had seen a lot of the church. I had talked and written about it, but I had not yet become a Christian. I know that until then I have been using the cause of Jesus Christ to my own advantage. The Bible, most particularly the Sermon on the Mount," he wrote, "has freed me from all this. Since then everything has changed. I now realize that the life of a servant of Jesus Christ must belong to the church. And step by step, it became clearer to me to what extent this must be so. Then came the distress of 1933. That strengthened my conviction, and then, too, I found others ready to concentrate their attention on this goal. All that mattered to me was the renewal of the church and the pastoral profession." Christian pacifism, which I had attacked before until shortly before, suddenly revealed itself as a matter of course. My vocation lies before me. My vocation lies before me. What God will make of it, I do not know. I believe we shall only perceive the gloriousness of this vocation in the times to come and the events they will bring us, if only we can hold out. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, this was the only time that you said such things to anyone. No one in the family would have noticed any change in you. Your theology students became aware of your personal involvement with the discipline of prayer. This brought you closer to your students at Berlin University during the winter of 1931-32, and you considered the possibility of leaving community life and study to pray in prayer. Water break. Could you hand me my water? Okay. Thank you. And wipes. Thank you. During the winter of 1931-32, you considered the possibility of leading community life in prayer. I want to say, as a minister, I know firsthand that such challenges to define the source of personal religious conviction are expected of those of us who are in the ministry and expect to be ordained, and that during the years of a person's ministry, personal religious beliefs can change. It's expected that self-examination is a continuous process. You Lutherans, you call this confession. I understand this is a different context from a Catholic believer confessing sins to a priest. That's not the confession that this word means. The Lutheran confession is a statement of religious belief. For example, my own confession is Buddhist. I can see that puzzles you, Dietrich. In Unitarian Universalist congregations, I'm still talking to him, you will find quite a few members who are Unitarians and also Jewish, Christian, pagan, Islamic. Did I leave anybody out? I said Buddhist. Didn't I say Buddhist? I should have. because that's me. And what we all have in common as Unitarian Universalists is love at the center. You can hold up your order of service, and there it is. Okay, thanks for the opportunity to explain that. I have to say that for the longest time, I did not fully understand the description of the German church as a confessing church. Seems like a weak translation. The German words are bekennende Kirche. Kirche means church, easy enough. Bekennende means self-confessed, or this I believe. During the 1930s, the Nazi government in Germany tried to establish a German national church that would comply and collaborate with the Nazi Party and facilitate Nazi Party objectives. In other words, it would not be a self-examining, bekennende, confessing church. Dr. Bonhoeffer, do you recall that happening? Of 14,000 pastors, 7,000 identified with the new National Nazi Party church. And the other 7,000 pastors, their own beliefs, identified with a confessing church who wished to remain independent of Hitler's government and preserve their own beliefs. Good luck with that, right? You were front and center of the members of the confessing church. You and your friend, Pastor Niemöller, helped to draft the beliefs of this new confessing church and the words of a pledge of allegiance to it. This pledge called for a new allegiance to the scriptures and Christian beliefs, 2, resist infringement of these, and 3, to afford financial help to those affected by the law of force, and 4, to reject the Aryan clause. Let's linger for a moment about that. The fourth item in the list of beliefs of the new confessing non-Nazi religious organization of which you were co-founder, you rejected admirably. You rejected the Aryan clause. And just to review what you meant by that, rejection of the Aryan clause meant that Jews would now be accepted into all aspects of German society. You thus resisted Adolf Hitler. That was brave of you to include the rejection of the Aryan clause in your statement of beliefs and pledge for a new allegiance to the scriptures. Brave because of what the Aryan clause said. But then something I have a hard time with. In 1934, you also included this statement, an oath of loyalty to Adolf Hitler. When I first learned that, I was shocked because I didn't understand why you included that oath of allegiance to Hitler. Then I understood that you were not the sole author of the organizational document of the confessing church. That the consensus was that while you would reject the Aryan clause and work for the rights of the Jews, you would also, on the other hand, include the oath of loyalty to Hitler. There's speculation that your group included that oath of loyalty because you don't want to give up being good Germans. That you wanted to defend the cultural and spiritual legacy of being a good German. Dietrich, I can certainly understand that. However, this many years later, I can see that reminder of the oath of loyalty to Hitler in 1934 still makes you squirm a little. Probably because of that inclusion of the loyalty oath, you were considered a traitor by some Germans after the war until the late 1980s, and also probably because of that, you have never, ever been honored by Yad Vashem, Israel's official memorial to the Jewish victims of the Holocaust. And in spite of your being part of the team that tried to assassinate Hitler and overthrow the German government on July 20th, 1944, so tomorrow, 1944, Dietrich, as we wrap up this discussion during your life, you constantly discerned your theological position, and I think it's normal. A few minutes ago, I quoted a letter you wrote in the 1930s in which you declared yourself a pacifist, yet by the mid-1940s you were involved in a clandestine group whose aim it was to assassinate Hitler. Your discernment of your beliefs changed your ministry. You accepted the role of ministerial presence in the group who would attempt the assassination. In your all too short lifetime, you had evolved from a small church pastor to theology professor, back to small church. I didn't say much about that. He served churches in England, and he was also a professor at Union Seminary in New York at one time. And he came back from New York, didn't want to stay there. He came back to be a part of the effort to do something about Hitler. In your too short lifetime, you had evolved from small church pastor to theology professor to fierce patriot to spy. He was at one time a double agent, didn't have time to talk about that. Writing your way through every stage and leaving a model for us of self-examination as we seek our own roles, what we're going to do in this challenging time. We appreciate your being here today and your many letters and papers that you left us. May they remind us that speaking truth to power is never easy, because before you can speak truth to power, you need to discover what's inside, what you really believe at this moment of your life, and what you believe and what you want to do can change. And this final thought, speaking the truth to ourselves, about the roles we want to play and are able to play and decide we have to play in resistance to powerful tyrants. This collective truth determines the role of the church in resistance. Do you agree, Reverend Bonhoeffer? I think I can see him nodding his head. Yes, thank you. Dankeschön, auf Wiedersehen, alles Gute.